The last few days of revelation from DOGE have given us extremely specific details that confirm what many of us have suspected for a while now. The US government is full of waste, fraud, and abuse. So first, let's talk about the fraud. Today, Antonio Gracias, a self-made billionaire and friend of Elon Musk, walked us through exactly how under the Biden administration, illegal immigration, voter fraud, and Social Security are linked. I want you to watch this.
We started at the top of the system, mapping the whole system of Social Security to understand where all the fraud was. And there's a lot of great people there that showed us really a lot of waste. And so that came up with a big list of stuff that we're working on. You've heard some of that already. But this is what jumped out at us. When we saw these numbers, we were like, what is this? In 21, you see 270,000 people, goes all the way to 2.1 million in 24. These are non-citizens that are getting Social Security numbers.
Yeah, this is a mind-blowing chart.
Yeah, this literally blew us away. Like, we went there to find fraud, and we found this by accident. This number, what this is when you come in the country, if you're illegal, there's a couple ways to come in. You come in through a port of entry, and you can tell them you're afraid, and they'll give you an asylum case. You'll get an interview, then you get in. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to just go to the border. Literally, this happened. I talked to Border Patrol myself. Elon was there too. I went to Laredo, and I went to Bronzeville. Elon went to Eagle Pass. You walk up to a Border Patrol officer, and you tell them you want to come in. They have a couple of choices. They could charge you with a misdemeanor or a felony under 1325, or they can make it an administrative offense, like a parking ticket, basically. They were told to do that, make it an administrative offense under the last administration. And then you go walk across the border. They do what's called a release your own recognizance, and they give you an NTA, a notice to appear, which to appear to judge. The wait times on judges are like average 6 years. Look at Grok, you'll see it on immigration judges. There's only 700 of them. This is 5.5 million people, okay? So what happens then? Once you're in the country and you got asylum through one of these pathways, and we map the whole thing out, you can apply for a work document. You file a 765, it's the work form. You get this form called the 766, that's the authorization, and then Social Security Administration automatically sends you in the mail your Social Security number. No interview, no ID.
This is worth just reiterating. It's not people sometimes think that under the Biden administration that he was simply asleep at the switch. He wasn't asleep.
No.
They weren't asleep at the switch. It was a massive, large-scale program to import as many illegals as possible, ultimately to change the entire voting map of the United States and disenfranchise the American people and make it a permanent, deep blue, one-party state from which there would be no escape.
Look, if I hadn't seen this myself, I'm not sure I'd have believed it. I went through it myself and mapped it, and Elon is right. This is true. The defaults in the system from Social Security to all of the benefit programs have been set to max inclusion, max pay for these people, and minimum collection. That's what's happening. We found 1.3 million of them already on Medicaid, as an example. We've gone through, on every benefit program we went through, we found groups from this particular group of people, this 5.5 million people, in those benefit programs. And then what was really, really disturbing us was why. We're asking ourselves why.
Right.
And so we actually just took a sample and looked at voter registration records. And we found people here registered to vote. In this population, yes.
And who did vote?
And we found some by sampling that actually did vote. And we have referred them to prosecution at the Homeland Security Investigation Service.
Yeah.
Okay, so what does this mean? Let's break down exactly what we were just told. Step one. So you notice that spike on the chart that Antonio had up? That shows that the Biden administration allowed people to enter the country illegally in increased numbers prior to the 2024 election. Whether it was by design or incompetence is a question, but what is not a question is that there were increased numbers of people entering the country illegally prior to that election. Step two, the administration gave many of those illegal immigrants a light slap on the wrist instead of a misdemeanor or a felony. And effectively, they got to stay here for years without consequence. And the way this works is that those illegal immigrants, rather than being turned away, which would be the ideal thing, or getting charged with a felony, they essentially just got an administrative offense, which is like a parking ticket. And they would just have to show up at a court hearing that might not happen for a long time, maybe even years, because the court system is so overwhelmed. It takes years for the case to be heard. And in the meantime, that illegal immigrant gets to just stay in the country. Step 3, give them a social security number so that they can get Medicaid and other benefits using taxpayer money. And here the rejoinder is often, oh, well, they don't get full benefits and they pay taxes. Yeah, illegal immigrants do pay some taxes. That's a fair point, but it's not as much as they receive in benefits. The Heritage Foundation estimated that the average unlawful immigrant household receives about $25,000 in government benefits and services while only paying about $10,000 in taxes. So that's an annual fiscal deficit of around $14,000 to $15,000 per household. So now that these people are in the country, step 4, remove voter ID requirements at a state level so that citizenship can't be verified. I live in California. I experienced this directly. In fact, funny story, on election day, I literally tried to show my ID and had it refused. I was like, let's see, maybe this is just like an internet thing. Like, surely I literally cannot not show my ID. Nope, that's exactly what happened. I tried to show my ID and had it refused. And on top of that, we've seen explicit moves to allow non-citizens to vote. In 2021, the New York City Council allowed approximately 800,000 non-citizens, specifically lawful permanent residents, but non-citizens, to vote in municipal elections, like mayor and city council. They passed a bill that would allow this, provided that they had resided in the city for at least 30 days. Now, the law never took effect because it was challenged immediately, and it was finally struck down on March 20th of this year, 2025. But it shows the Democrats' willingness to extend voting rights to non-citizens. Imagine if they had been in power. Do you think they might have extended that right even further? It's worth contemplating. And then there's the issue of, well, did some non-citizens and in fact illegal immigrants vote in the 2024 election? Because according to Antonio, they found outright evidence of illegal immigrants actually voting in that election. He found a significant portion of the Social Security numbers that were given to illegal immigrants also were registered in the voter rolls. Step 5 is illegal immigrants now vote on a smaller scale in states where voter ID isn't required. And how would voter fraud work? Because look, I think a lot of time people are saying, it's ridiculous. There weren't millions of illegal immigrants voting. You don't need millions. You don't need a massive amount of voter fraud to swing an election. In the 2020 election, 2 key swing states, Arizona and Georgia, were won by roughly 10,000 and 12,000 votes respectively. That is a tiny amount considering the tens of millions of votes that are cast. So if that had happened at sufficient scale in a few key swing states, step 6 would have been you just win the election. And with that power that you have over the executive branch and maybe over the legislative branch, you give citizenship to illegal immigrants so that they can vote on a larger scale. And that's what the Biden administration tried to do in 2021 with the U.S. Citizenship Act. That act would have given illegal immigrants an 8-year path to citizenship. So you allow illegal immigrants into the country, you let them stay here longer than they should because you give them a court date that is going to be years in the future because the judicial system is overrun. You give them benefits, they stay here, you give them citizenship. Guess who they're going to be loyal to? The same people who let them in. Step 8 is now presidential elections are just like California elections, just different shades of blue. And as someone who lives in California and just had to evacuate his home due to the LA fires, I see what happens when your state goes so deep blue that even when disasters happen, you still get to hold on to power. If that sounds conspiratorial to you, so be it. Maybe it's just gross incompetence and a bunch of disconnected events. But here's the thing. Extreme incompetence is indistinguishable from genuine malevolence. And even if you dispute that all of this was planned intentionally, what can't be disputed is that all of this was happening simultaneously. So intentional or not, it is an attack vector that needs to be closed. And anyone who exploited that attack vector at any scale needs to go to prison because it's treason. That's the biggest fraud bombshell. But I mentioned fraud, waste, and abuse. So now let's talk about the waste and the abuse. Because Thursday, Elon and the DOGE team did an interview, and they detailed some of the most insane findings from DOGE's efforts so far. Here's a compilation of some of the wildest findings. The NIH has nearly 700 different IT systems. Most of them don't talk to each other.
There's 700 different IT systems today at NIH.
700 different IT systems.
IT software systems.
They
can't speak to each other.
And so they don't talk to one another.
They have 27 different CIOs. And so when you think about making great medical discoveries, you have to connect the data.
Time out. You said 27 different chief information officers?
Correct.
And most of them are non-technical.
So there's a lot there.
There's a lot of opportunity. It will make science better, not worse.
And when I say that our job is tech support, I really mean it.
Yeah.
We have to fix the computers. If the computers can't talk to each other, you can't get research done. If the computers can't stay online, people won't receive their Social Security. So what we have here are a bunch of failing computer systems that are preventing people from receiving their benefits, that are preventing people from preventing research from happening, that are extremely vulnerable to fraud, and we're fixing it.
Our government spent $1 billion implementing a 10-question survey.
Literally 10-question survey that you could do with SurveyMonkey, cost you about $10,000. The government was being charged almost $1 billion for that.
For just the survey?
$1 billion for a simple online survey, do you like the national park? And then there appeared to be no feedback loop for what would be done with that survey. So the survey would just go into nothing.
There are twice as many active credit cards than there are government employees. There's over 5 million government employees and twice as many credit cards. And the process for retiring government employees literally involves processing files in an underground mine. Like, that's how archaic our systems are. And that means that even if you're genuinely trying to lay off many government employees quickly so that you can improve government efficiency, you can only do that at a rate of about 10,000 employees a month due to, I kid you not, limitations on how slow the elevator is that goes up and down into this mine. Crazy. This is on top of earlier findings like finding out that $4.7 trillion of government spending over the last several years that the Treasury Department has issued is untraceable. We don't even know how that money was spent or why it was spent, because the field where government employees are supposed to mark how that money was spent was optional instead of being mandatory. Many of you have either worked in corporate life or maybe you still work in the corporate world. I used to be in the corporate world. There was no situation where I was allowed to spend the company's money without it having explicitly detailed rationale in a modern digital system where I could be held accountable. So just think about this from first principles. If the government doesn't have accountability, because first of all, even the president can't fire the majority of government's employees. They have a ton of civil service protections that protects their jobs. Having a government job is one of the most secure jobs you can have in the world, which is great for the employees, but for the people who are paying those employees, who functionally we are the boss, not only do we not have transparency, we don't have levers of accountability, because even if things and funds are mismanaged, what can we actually do about it? I mean, the elected representatives are barely accountable to us. What about the unelected public servants? So do I think that majority of government's employees are corrupt? Absolutely not. There's definitely some bad apples, but I think a lot of them are just caught in a system that's not accountable. It's not incentivized to be effective. It's not incentivized to be efficient, and it's just not serving the American people. So it's basically like a company that has been running a multi-trillion-dollar debt for years, but the company can never shut down. There's never any accountability. It's madness. So what's the high-level takeaway here? Right now, when we focus on the government fraud, waste, and abuse, the thesis is that there's enough of that for DOGE to be able to reduce government spending by $1 trillion. Democrats are complaining that this means removing tons of benefits and services that Americans rely on. But it is obvious that there's tremendous amounts of waste in the government. And in fact, as a result, Elon has made the opposite claim, that we can cut $1 trillion of waste, fraud, and abuse and actually make government benefits and services better. For example, I want you to see what he just said about Social Security fraud stopping people from currently receiving their Social Security benefits. Check this out.
And they steal people's Social Security is what happens. Is they call in, they say they claim to be a retiree, then they convince the Social Security person on the phone to change where the money's flowing. It actually goes to some fraudster. There's this happening all day, every day. And then somebody doesn't receive their Social Security. It's because of all the fraud loopholes in the Social Security system.
How do you reassure people that what you all are doing is not going to affect their benefits?
No, in fact, what we're doing will help their benefits. Legitimate people, as a result of the work of DOGE, will receive more Social Security, not less. I want to emphasize that. As a result of the work of DOGE, legitimate recipients of Social Security will receive more money, not less money.
All right.
I want to emphasize that point and let the record show that I said this, and it will be proven out to be true.
There's more than just waste in the government. There's outright fraud. Many people have been victims of identity fraud and have someone who's stolen their Social Security number and identity getting checks that they should be getting. So if we can solve a lot of these problems, we get a better government, not just a smaller one. And don't you guys want a smaller, better government? And on another note, it's very easy to focus on the federal layoffs. And my heart goes out to any federal government employee who has lost their job. Because on a human level, it doesn't matter what all the abstract conceptual reasons are. Losing your job is a scary thing. It's very scary. Now, I'll note that less than 1% of the people who were laid off did not receive some sort of severance. Many of those packages were 8-month severance, which is actually really generous in the corporate world. So these people are not just having the table flipped over and told, okay, good luck. But it's still a traumatic experience to lose your job, and I totally get why some people are just emotionally distraught over it. But at the end of the day, the point of the government is not to provide people jobs. The point of the government, among other things, is to create an overall ecosystem where everyone has jobs and their needs met, but not be bigger so that we have more people in government. Like, that's not how we're supposed to be doing this thing. So yeah, that's what the efficiency effort requires. Like, yes, we do need to be laying people off if 100 people are doing a job that one can do, or if we have 700 different IT systems when we could replace them with 5. And on a final note here, before Elon entered the picture, it seemed like everyone agreed that there's a ton of waste, fraud, and abuse in the government. And it reminds me, just like before Trump ran for president the first time, everyone agreed that politicians were corrupt and there's a swamp that needed to be drained. But somewhere along the line, people became so fixated on the people who are solving the problem that they seem to miss the enormity of the problems those people are solving. And another thing that's being revealed here is how much of this problem isn't simply a matter of slashing budgets. A lot of it is about outdated software and complicated money trails. So what does that actually mean? A lot of this is actually technical, and coding problems. And that's why DOGE is so revolutionary. We've had 5 major efforts to create government efficiency since 2001. In fact, there's a great clip from 2011 of Obama announcing a DOGE-like effort to bring government efficiency, headed by your buddy Joe Biden. So it's no wonder it wasn't so successful, right? And none of those 5 efforts have produced more than $25 billion of savings. So for all the things that people complain about DOGE for, having a bunch of self-made billionaires involved and young genius coders involved, those things that they're critiquing are actually DOGE's strength. The bureaucrats have not been able to solve this problem for the last 25 years. Many of these problems can be solved with just better systems. It's not about cutting some money here and cutting some money there. You need to re-architect these entire systems. So if Elon, the most successful technologist in the world, surrounded by a bunch of other geniuses who have made billions of dollars by delivering billions of dollars of value and solutions to humanity's problems, like one of the co-founders of Airbnb, he's involved. If these people can't solve this problem, who can? Joe Biden? AOC? Bernie Sanders? Who's going to solve this problem? Do you trust any of these politicians to solve this problem? So you don't have to like Elon. You don't like to have his approach. You don't like the fact that a bunch of 20-year-old coders are in the Social Security Administration databases. But if they don't solve the problem, I don't see who else can. So I hope that detractors of DOGE and Elon See this, because a lot of the fears that they have about his influence are vague and general, and they're risks that are worth keeping in mind. It's important to have guardrails around anyone. And I understand the concerns, but a lot of these are vague, general concerns that fall away when you realize just how wasteful our government is and know the specifics of how they're wasting our money. And you can do your part to help people who are in fear and talking about vague things like oligarchy and fascism, just to focus on specifics and ask them, hey, are any of these things that DOGE has uncovered things that you want your money going toward? Any of these things? Okay, so you have general fears about the people. Do you have any specific concerns about the specific problems that they've uncovered? And better yet, do you have an alternative? Do you have a different person you can point to in the world and say, yeah, they'd be better equipped to solve these problems than DOGE? If you don't have a better solution, then stop focusing on the people and start focusing on the bigger problem. Because we have approaching $37 trillion of debt, a consistent $2 trillion deficit. We basically have a national credit card that we are running up the balance on. And our interest payments are now over $1 trillion a year. If we don't get to figure this out, we're going to be talking about more than layoffs. In fact, we're going to be talking about more than a recession. We're going to be talking about a second Great Depression. So if we don't have great solutions to that, it's time to stop complaining. So if you're watching this, the best thing that you can do as a citizen is share this info with people who don't know. In a vacuum of information, fear is what thrives.